Members, we now turn to the Riccarton Racecourse Development Enabling Bill and the Riccarton Racecourse Bill. The Business Committee determined on the 9th of March 2016 that the committee stage of the Riccarton Racecourse Development Enabling Bill and the Riccarton Racecourse Bill be considered as one question for the purposes of debate, with separate votes on each question at the end of the debate. Members, the question therefore is that parts 1 and 2 and clauses 1 to 3 of the Riccarton Racecourse Development Enabling Bill and clauses 1 to 14 and the schedules 1 and 2 of the Riccarton Racecourse Bill stand part.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah. It's all right. I don't think you need to. I'm going to call Dr. Megan Woods in a moment. Just 1 moment, please. Let's go here. Seat leave.
Oh, I do that after you give the call, so you can do this. Is taking up their little time. That's great. Yes, because this is about the vote, so you can give the call and then they can.
Before we have the vote. Okay, it's later on. Yep. Dr. Megan Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's my pleasure to take a call on this Riccarton Racecourse Development Enabling Bill and the Riccarton Racecourse Bill in committee stages. And Mr. Speaker, we have spoken at previous readings that these are two pieces of legislation that started life in quite a different form as a local bill in one instance, that are now coming back to this House at committee stage after being worked on by Select Committee and being heard as one part. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to acknowledge the work that the Local Government and Environment Select Committee did on this piece of legislation at that Select Committee stage. I think a number of very good changes were made that have seen a better piece of legislation, or better pieces of legislation, returned to this House. And I think that it was fortuitous that actually a number of the permanent members of the Local Government and Environment Select Committee at the time were in fact Canterbury-based MPs. So in addition to myself, Eugenie Sage from the Green Party, and we also had Matt Ducey, Joanne Hayes and Nook Karako from the National Party who heard this legislation. Of course, we were ably assisted by those not fortunate enough to come from Canterbury, Mr. Chairman. But what this legislation does is it enables development of housing in the area around the Riccarton Racecourse, which in itself is fortunately placed in the good electorate of Wigram, Mr. Chairman, and will allow for the development of housing in that area. But in this contribution at committee stage, I want to concentrate on the Riccarton Racecourse Development Enabling Bill part of this legislation, part 2, and specifically clauses 9, 10 and 11. If time permits, I may have to come back to them in a later call, Mr. Chairman. But clause 9 of this bill is an important clause in this legislation, in that it sets out the minimum requirements for the development scheme should it go ahead. And the legislation is quite prescriptive around what the minimum requirements for the development scheme will be. That there is a requirement for 180 affordable homes to be built on this development land and to be issued with code compliance certificates under the Building Act 2004 and to have been sold for occupation primarily as the home or residence of not more than one household no later than 5 years after the approval date. And that clause 9A actually sets a bit of a gold standard for what housing should be. And unfortunately not what we are seeing in terms of housing in this country at the moment. We are not seeing enough affordable housing, and there is a definition of affordable housing in this legislation, which we think is quite at the high end of what is affordable, but also the issuing of code compliance certificates, which actually, if you're familiar with the number of repairs that have happened in Canterbury over the last 5.5 years, this isn't a foregone conclusion that you will have a code of compliance with your building. But I think to have been sold for the occupation primarily as the home or resident of not more than one household is an important part of clause 9A, Mr. Chairman. That what we have here saying that as a family home should not be for a number of families to be squashed into that. Throughout other parts of my electorate, Mr. Chairman, it is not uncommon to have 17, 18 or 19 people living in a home that really should only be used for the purposes of housing one family. So I'm very pleased to see that. I'm also pleased to see that there's actually there's a bit of a protection against ghost houses contained in this section 9A as well, and that these do have to be occupied no later than 5 years after the approval date. So these houses cannot merely be built and sat there and not utilised, with the owners thinking that they're just going to wait for the capital gains to flow in, and rather than provide them for what a house should be, and that is a home for people, Mr Chair. So I think that that is really important to see those protections there in clause 9A. I think some of the other requirements, not only of the house but of the development itself, are set out in this broader clause 9. That we do need that the fibre optic broadband connections to be provided to all premises that we are building in the 21st century, and there's also talk around be capable of satisfying the relevant regional and district planning requirements, including in relation to providing any infrastructure to service the development in the manner proposed by the scheme. And Mr Chairman, this is very important. This development, when it was first proposed, was proposed to be what was going to be known as an exemplar project in Christchurch. And exemplar projects were a specific planning instrument that were put in place, Mr Chairman, to allow for expedited housing development in Christchurch. Mr Chairman.
Dr. Megan Wood.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Unfortunately, Mr Chairman, we have only seen one of these exemplar developments take place in the city of Christchurch over this time, because it's not only the houses that matter, Mr Chairman, it's the kind of planning that we put around these housing developments that are going to be what the future of our city in Christchurch hangs on. And what are the transport planning requirements that we are putting in place? And Mr Chairman, I've been on record at other stages in this bill saying that I do have some reservations that not enough thought has been given to that vital piece of infrastructure that is provided for in 9C, that not enough thought has been given. And if this had been done through the instrument of an exemplar development, that we would have had the kind of integrated planning that will make for good urban development that could have been possible. But Mr Chairman, anyone from Christchurch who knows how congested Yoldhurst Road gets at peak times, and simply putting the traffic from 600 more homes onto that road with no thought is not going to work. What we need to be doing is thinking in a progressive and long-term manner about the kind of transport requirements for the new shape that Christchurch has grown in. We know there are large developments to the north in the Waimakariri district, and there are large developments to the west of Christchurch City, but also through into the Selwyn district. And we need to give some serious thought to the infrastructural requirements of how it is that we provide for those developments. The other note that I'd make here, that in clause 9, and this is again in clause 9E and then repeated in clause 10, is of course that Ngāi Tahu are given the first right of refusal on this parcel of land. Because, Mr Chairman, this is after all land that has been protected under a reserve status, and so under the terms of the 1998 Settlement Act, it is only right that this be offered first and foremost to the local tangata whenua, who then, through Ngāi Tahu Property Limited, one of their development companies, have the opportunity to develop this land. And it's the legislation is littered with enough clues that this seems to be something that Ngāi Tahu Property, one of the holdings companies, of course, of the Ngāi Tahu iwi, seem that they are going to take up, Mr Chairman. And I think that we have seen Ngāi Tahu undertake a number of developments around Christchurch in the post-earthquake era, and I know in my own electorate in Wigram that this will not be their first rodeo, that there are a number of developments that have sprung up and have some good factors to them. So, Mr Chairman, Labour will be supporting this bill. I think that we do need to give some good and genuine thought to the kind of development we are doing, and I think that clause 9 of this legislation offers a good guide for that, Mr Chairman.
Mr Chairman.
I call